brought to you by ABSA, a member of Barclays, in association with Business Leadership South Africa.
Hello and a warm welcome to yet another edition of NDP, A Plan in Motion. I'm Guguletu Gele. Now, the NDP states that about 90% of jobs will be created through small and expanding companies by 2030. On this episode, we'll hone in on enterprise development, from its role in the South African economy to whether or not the country has the right regulatory framework in place to help drive this sector. Joining me to discuss this further, I have Nomvula Makgotlho, who is the Chief Director of the Ministry of Small Business Development in South Africa, Roy Ross, Chief Executive of Business Banking Africa for Barclays Africa, National Planning Commissioner Miriam Altman, who is also the Head of Group Strategy at Telkom, and Matsi Modise, who is the National Executive Director of the South African Black Entrepreneurs Forum. And of course, we're also joined by a wonderful studio audience who will be participating in the discussion via their questions, commentary, as well as some of their feedback from what we get from our panelists today. Well, ladies and gentlemen, let's not waste any further time and get straight into this particular topic. The current landscape for the small business owner in South Africa is not a very positive one. Yes, we have significant ambitions of having about 49 million SMMEs who might need to grow at a growth rate of about 20% in order to supply the 11 million jobs. But if you look at our recent GDP reading as well as CPI, energy crisis in South Africa, the odds are not in favor of the small business owner. Matsi, if we can start with you, with your view on the current situation for entrepreneurs in SA.
It looks doom. It's doom and gloom, but it presents an opportunity. And you do know that entrepreneurs and small business owners are people that are supposed to make something out of nothing. We have an energy crisis. Why do we not create an environment that promotes entrepreneurship within? How do we come up with solutions? You know, starting small businesses, being entrepreneurial, it's about finding solutions. So you have to have a very positive perspective, because the ability for South African small businesses to thrive and survive during these times is what will then enable us to see that how are we then going to create more jobs in South Africa. So I would say that as much as there are challenges, we have to now create a supportive environment for small businesses to grow.
Mm-hmm. Miriam, to come to you, challenges, but the support is there.
Well, what I wanted to say was we talk about small and expanding firms, and that's a really important point, because a growth of the small and medium-sized enterprise sector, if you can call it a sector, could be a growth driver for the economy more broadly. So we shouldn't fetishize or create a fetish of small firms. What we're talking about in the plan are entrepreneurial firms that have a chance of creating jobs and expanding. There's a big difference. So the kind of ecosystem that's needed and support is key, and we often don't get to the right complement of services and funding that's needed for that, or the kind of innovation and support more generally.
Mm-hmm. I want us to get into that support system in a moment, but Roy, if we get your view on the challenges being faced by small and medium enterprises, when they speak to you and your colleagues, what do they say?
Yeah, Guguletu, I'm optimistic, by nature, and I see much more opportunity than pitfalls. I think in South Africa we've got a great infrastructure. We've got large companies. We've got multinationals represented, right across, South Africa, but also the continent. So in many ways, I think we've got the infrastructure to meet this challenge. From a financial institution point of view, we've got leading, South African businesses, in our borders. A lot of international banks are represented. So I think if we really unite our forces, I think we can make a massive difference in this world. Mm-hmm. In talking to customers, I suppose as a financial institution, it often starts with access to finance, but the challenge is greater than that. Mm. And I'm sure, some of those we'll look to answer, as the show goes on.
Nomvula, to bring your voice into the conversation.
Thank you very much, Kuku. And I'm representing the Department of Small Business. And for us to have a Department of Small Business in the country, it shows that government has realized the importance and the strategicness of small business in the building of our economy. Mm-hmm. And this department is really, we are, actually working, it's against all odds, because we are working in a space which has been existing for quite a long time. SMMEs, I mean, like our president is saying, small business is big business. SMMEs has been existing with quite a number of challenges, access to finance, infrastructure, technology, you name them. But now what we are saying is that how do we take them from where they are to a level where they can command in the mainstream economy. We do have support systems in place. We do have interventions that we have put in place. But however, we will need a lot of conversation and discussion and engagement between ourselves, small businesses, and big business. The main critical thing is partnership between ourselves and big business, because procurement opportunities are not amongst small businesses, but it's between small business and big business, and of course within the public sector. So that is where we are moving towards, and to say small businesses are not a homogeneous group. We have women, we have youth, we have people with disabilities, we have rural enterprises, an area which does not have a lot of support as it is right now. So those are the areas where we are trying to penetrate into. But over and above that, we are talking small businesses and cooperatives, because they have an opportunity of creating employment, creating a building economy and source of livelihood for many people.
The theme that I'm really picking up on and hearing from your opening remarks is obviously camaraderie, working together, finding the right structures and the opportunities that might be presented in various fields. Does it all start with the regulatory framework? And I'd like to stick with you here, Nomvula, because when we speak to entrepreneurs on the ground, they tell us that there's too much red tape in their way. Are we making any progress from your ministry's department in trying to minimize the amount of red tape and speed up the growth and participation of SMMEs in the sector?
Yes, Kuku, that is one of the biggest challenges that have been picked up while we're still in the DTI and even currently in the Department of Small Business. We have realized that we have quite a plethora of legislative pieces for SMMEs. But however, most of them are actually creating a lot of challenges and limitations, especially for SMMEs. I mean, for instance, you register a business in CPIC, you run to SARS for your tax clearance, you run to CIFA or to the banks for funding, you know, and all those things we have realized that they are not talking to each other. There's also the issue of compliance, which is very expensive and time consuming for a small or medium practitioner who has put their time on running the SMME. But however, if they still have to put aside time for compliance, run around to all these departments, to all these institutions, which are not under the same roof, it takes time, it removes them from running their businesses. And it's a big challenge that, in fact, that is the first on the list of priorities for the new department. We need to address that area so that the rest, I think, will fall into shape.
Miriam, we've got 15 years before 2030 actually comes here. Do you believe that that's enough time for us to sort out the regulatory issues in order to speed up the progress here?
You could sort it out this year if you wanted to. Of course you could. You could sort it out this year, you could sort it out next year. It takes will. But what I wanted to say about the regulatory environment is the NDP it really does put forward a whole bunch of recommendations, which, you know, I would agree here that the regulatory environment really needs to be simplified and made easier. But you ask anybody, is the cost of capital too high? Is the regulatory environment too onerous? They will always say yes. It doesn't matter where you are, they will always say yes. The key is to have opportunity. And so the DTI focus and for the Ministry of Small Business, the current focus on procurement in a concentrated economy to break open the value chain in government and in the private sector is one of the most important things. If you don't have opportunity, you have nothing. If you don't have access to the value chain, you know, people will always get around the problem of finance, regulation, and everything else if there's opportunity.
Roy and Matsi, I want to bring you both in on this part, because Roy, not only does Barclays provide financing, but obviously more mentorship and alternative means of support to these SMMEs. Are there opportunities there? And as the middleman or the big brother in this role, is it easy to connect the two parties to this potential?
I think the problem statement has been, you know, I think well explained by Nomvula, and, you know, to Miriam's point, you know, I think we can break this logjam, you know, again, if we put our minds together. I think what we have to, in doing so, is really try and release the entrepreneur to do what they do best. And that's, I suppose, you know, create businesses, employ people, and get on with making money. And, you know, I think if you look at the role that we play, you know, the development, enterprise development centers, of which we got 7 around the country, that platform is designed to exactly do that. How do we direct people much, you know, in much more concentrated fashion to the right places, rather than running around it like scalded chickens, you know, pillar to post. So it's that early education, us creating, you know, the linkage I think in this ecosystem, and making it easier, you know, for people. And once, I suppose, you do get them, you know, set on their way, you know, in providing that skills and the mentorship, which we do play a role in, and thousands are coming through our doors, you know, every year, as you start to see the fruits of our labour bearing fruit, which is very encouraging.
Matsi, you agree?
Yes, I agree. And to add on to Roy's point is that opportunity has to meet the ability and readiness and willingness for entrepreneurs to take advantage of it. Yes, it's all fair, it's all good that the government is going to create the platform, it's going to create the framework. Yes, it does have its challenges in terms of implementing that. But we have to essentially invest in entrepreneurs and the ability to take advantage of these opportunities. Why is it that we're trying to push for black industrialists in South Africa? Can we name 5 black industrialists? Have we invested in grooming the next set of black industrialists? What industries are these black industrialists going to come from? So as much as the government can do what it has to do, corporate South Africa can create enterprise centers around the country. How many entrepreneurs do we have that are ready to actually take advantage of that? Have we invested sufficient time and sufficient resources in terms of working on them, with them, into their businesses?
On the industrialists, I take it you're referring to the DTI's initiative.
Well, the IDC, DTI,
exactly,
that's correct.
100 industrialists. Yeah. Nomvula, you might want to come in and respond here.
I think this is a very critical point that Matsi is raising, that you need to create platforms, but you also need to have people who will take up the uptakers of those opportunities. I attended a summit of market access with some big business. And what they said to me was that, you know, we hear you are talking about one of my other areas of interest, it's women entrepreneurship. What they were saying is that we hear you are talking about creating opportunities for women. But whenever we say we have this opportunity and we want a woman to come and take this opportunity, we run around, we can't find them, or if they are there, they are not able to meet the requirements. I think the first thing that we need to look at is to prepare. To what extent are we preparing entrepreneurs to take up these opportunities? I think the reality of the matter in our country is that there's a lot of unemployment. So in order for most people to get a source of livelihood, because they have exhausted all avenues in looking for jobs, the next best thing to do is to go for some small business. You know, small business becomes a fallback. It's not the first interest. The culture of entrepreneurship has to be harnessed within starting from primary school level, starting from up to tertiary level, so that people go into entrepreneurship as a first choice. I think Matsi indicated it earlier on that entrepreneurs go there because they want to make it. It's not because they don't have any other source of livelihood.
Yeah.
So in order for us, all of us, it starts with us as government. Why are we talking enterprise development? Why is it one of the scorecards on the BEE? It's because of that point that we have realized that we need to develop enterprises so that they can produce quality products, quality service on time, whenever it's required.
So the facts are there that they need to be implemented, but if we also look at two cities that I want to make a comparison of, the city of Tshwane, which is the capital of the country, has its own initiative called Tepo 10,000,
Yes.
where it's trying to cultivate and groom entrepreneurship within the city of Tshwane. You look at the economic hub of the country, the city of Johannesburg, it has Josie at Work as well, where it's trying to provide the same initiative. Whilst we can have the DTI doing this, the city of Tshwane, city of Johannesburg doing this, and many other initiatives across the country, are we finding though that these are in line with the bigger blueprint, Miriam, to come to you, being the NDP? Do these plans and initiatives actually speak to each other, and is there some kind of marriage along the way in these initiatives?
I think that's actually one of the problems. We have a lot of fragmentation. You know, Minister Zulu was making that point at the launch of our enterprise development program, that there's so much fragmentation and lack of cooperation in the system. I think also we need to identify properly what national should be doing. Often when national is reporting on policies, they'll talk about, we helped 5,000 people this year, that type of thing, or we helped 10,000 people. That's not a national program.
Yeah.
What we need to be doing is releasing energy around the country. So it's great that metropolitan areas have programs, but then we need partnerships with the private sector. You'll often find that the hubs, the innovation and entrepreneurship hubs that work are the ones that are run by the private sector, in truth. And so supporting, government supporting business development is in the private sector hubs, I think is incredibly important. I just also wanted to add, maybe a little bit controversial, but this idea of black industrialists,
Yeah.
let's be serious. Share ownership does not make an industrialist. So when we're trying to change the codes, I think the codes have really driven behavior in a really good way, and the way they've changed over the past few years has been excellent, besides the fact that they're so complicated that you need an accountant to tell you what they mean. But aside from that, the move to procurement is an incredibly important thing. To then say we want to move away from broad-based development towards a black industrialist program means you just want to concentrate share ownership. An industrialist is somebody who runs a company. A share owner is not an industrialist. It's somebody, you know, you're building up assets, you're getting more people access to share ownership, that's a great thing. But that is not an industrialist. An industrialist, and I know plenty of black industrialists now. There are so many young and not old, actually, black business owners in a whole range of sectors now. I meet them almost every day. I meet new people.
Be sure to share their names with Matsi, because we couldn't
Well,
count
probably,
5.
No, there's, come on, no, I'm sorry.
We know, I'm sure they are.
I meet amazing young people all the time who are going to be the future owners. I meet them, you know, we were in Khayelitsha the other day, and I just happened upon a hub and met a group of fantastic kids who were all business owners, some of whom had won awards. You know, even just by chance, I meet people like that. And you know, 15, 20 years ago, it wasn't like that so much. But today, there are people around. So to say we don't know that there are people there, there really are. There's way more than 100 nascent entrepreneurs. And I don't mean, you know, selling fish and chips and retail. I mean scientists, people, engineers, people who really want to do, you know, develop innovative products, you know, real entrepreneurs who have growth prospects. And those are the people we need to mentor and support and grow, but there's plenty of people now. So I hate to think that we're veering towards a concentration of asset ownership and calling that those black industrialists.
Instead of people who have the intellectual
Instead of
capacity
people who really
to
are
run
going
those
to
operations.
develop businesses, those are the people we need to support.
Matsi, before I come to you, I just need to bring Roy into this perspective. Does this make your life from the private sector and as a financier slightly more difficult than clearly?
You know, I want to say, just support Miriam in the point that this is where I think regulation has assisted us. You know, and I suppose it translates into the code, which is translated into big corporates driving procurement programs now. And I think it's starting to make a difference. I've been in the industry a long time, but I've seen a big shift in the last 2 or 3 years. where, and that's why we play the role as facilitator between the big corporates, many of them are clients, and as they're wanting to develop their value chains and develop small businesses, this is happening around us. And we can talk later, but one of the recipients of that, and a great story, and let me say an aspiring and an emerging industrialist, is in our midst yet today in the audience. And I would say to him, he can tell his own story, but he started as an entrepreneur and in a very simple form. And he's learnt his trade, and now he's got, call it a real business behind him, and employing 40 or 50 people, and with great aspirations. So I think regulation has driven this change. There I say regulation has been positive. I think corporate South Africa is starting to come to the game.
Yeah.
Perhaps it's long overdue,
Sure.
but I think the seeds of change are blowing around us.
I tell you what, it would be nice if that industrialist prepares itself to get the mic in his hand. But Matsi, to come to you before we cross to the audience for questions.
Well, I feel that there's no shortage of black SMMEs in South Africa. Black people that have started companies, have grown companies, and they're sustainable. My reference to industrialists is people that start new industries, people that are captains of industries, people that are going to start the discoveries of this world. So that's what I'm saying. That for me, that's my definition of what an industrialist is. I work with small businesses on a daily basis. I work with small black businesses on a daily basis. So there's no shortage of that. But we need more captains of industries, people that are going to steer industries. That's my reference to black industrialists.
At least we know that there's agreement
There's
in
an
that
agreement,
regard.
absolutely.
Can I just add one more point?
Go ahead, Roy.
SMEs, I think we underestimate the role that they play in innovation. A lot of new innovation doesn't come from the big guys. The innovation very often comes from small guys. And I suppose the one industrialist was a world famous guy we got is, started his business in a garage and almost sold it out of a garage Mark Shuttleworth, And, so that point of innovation is not the realm of the big industrialists and the big guys.
And jobs.
Which equals to economic growth.
Yes.
Precisely. We'll venture into the topic of innovation in a moment, as well as the partnership with bigger players in the industry. But we're looking for that in black industrialist who can give us more perspective on his growth and his experience. If you could please stand up, sir, and give us your view as to the kind of support that you've received from an institution like Barclays.
I guess that will be me. Good afternoon. My name is Katuma Shao, and ironically, today marks 16 years of me running my own business. Wow. So you can imagine that I've gone through it all, I've seen it all. But what the panel is actually talking about is very true. There's a lot of fragmentation. There's a lot of programs that are there, but they're not focused. And you also look at the issues of innovation. When the economy and the NDP, what it's continuing to do, it does not talk to an innovation-driven economy. It's talking to a much more tendering system, a system that says supply and demand. But if you come up with your own product and you say, this is what I've got in the market, this is what is the problem that it is solving, you would not get much support. And that is why we are not going to get much industrialists, because we are continuing to be a consumeristic kind of a nation. And the economy is continuing along that line. Yes, we can be able to have black industrialists. Currently, you mentioned the city of Johannesburg, we're training about 1,000 young people in skills of ICT technical skills. And we're talking of things that will help them to go into the industries of smart cities, your e-mobility that the Technology Innovation Agency is working on. And if you run and develop new support for those kind of young people, definitely they will grow, because there's so many sectors that they can branch in within that particular cluster that is empowered by ICT. But do we have support? No. Hardly. There's a lot of talk shop. There's a lot of people that say so many things, and we like them talking, but we don't see them coming to the party. Thank you.
Katu, thank you so much for your insights. They will come back to the panel in a moment to get some feedback on that. But I'd like to call on Sabine Dal Omo, who is the Chief Executive of Siemens for Africa, as well as the eastern and western part of the continent. Maybe if you can give us your view as someone who is from the private sector, a multinational, when you look into a country like South Africa, are the sentiments that the panel is sharing today and the voices that you've heard, like Katu, are they making you slightly more apprehensive about investing in a country like South Africa?
Well, thank you so much. You have already introduced myself. Well, I must say, I mean, from Siemens, just to say, we see the whole topic around empowerment and development of Africa, and specifically South Africa, as an advantage for us, because it makes also a possibility to find resources which you do not find in other continents. And I had a discussion with Nomvula a couple of months ago, specifically around the development and how we can identify with a new scorecard women entrepreneurs, smaller companies, in order to see how we can phase them into a multinational business environment. Because what you have to see, I mean, and I like the comment from my predecessor, it's basically, the point is, if you want to have an entrepreneurship, it has to be around technology, and it has to be about things they develop and they own themselves. Because if you partner with industry, we only will be able to give you a small portion of it. Intellectual property, which is not that valuable to us anymore, because otherwise we will basically outplace ourselves out of the market. So it's something where we really have to focus on. And for us, the point is, it starts when you look at the scorecard as a totality of the scorecard, looking at education and on training, on skills development, and then basically phasing these people into the enterprise development chain so that the people have really a chance to create a value for themselves. Because otherwise they will be always dependent on somebody and on a bigger company. And if you look at the dimensions of South Africa, the economy is basically defined by a very few big corporations, and then there is long-time a couple of smaller ones, and then there's a lot of small entrepreneurs in the townships wherever the people make a living. But if you look at Germany, for instance, the German economy is completely backboned by the medium-sized industry. Our medium-sized entrepreneurs, they develop every day a new technology, a new system, a new product, and they basically keep it running. And I think that is very, very important for the South African economy. And there I'm really happy that we have the access to Nomvula to have that kind of dialogue with government and private party to get basically companies to grow into a situation that they also can be a sub-supplier with a product to our company, which we might not be able to develop ourselves.
Thank you so much for your comments there. We have to take a short break there, but I'm happy that we've gotten quite a few points to follow up on. Naturally, you know, entrepreneurs, are they made or are they born? We'll also touch on the topic of private partnerships, public partnerships, as well as access to markets, which I think is something that a lot of entrepreneurs actually struggle with. So that and so much more coming back right after this short ad break. A warm welcome back. You're watching NDP, a plan in motion, where we are discussing enterprise development. Still with me in studio, I have Nomvula Makgotlho, who is from the Ministry of Small Business Development, Roy Ross from Barclays Africa, National Planning Commissioner Miriam Altman, as well as Matsi Modise from the South African Black Entrepreneurs Forum. Well, the conversation is going, and we've certainly heard some insights from our audience members, which does consist of black industrialists and business owners. Maybe they will be the Adrian Gores of the future. Quite clearly. But one particular theme that really sticks out for me is obviously not only the level of innovation that we need to learn from our international counterparts, as Sabine did make mention of, but the fact that the black industrials and entrepreneurs, who are actually regardless of color, are actually out there. And the framework that's in place is assisting them. Miriam, to come to you, do you agree with this statement?
We had, you know, most of the jobs that were created over the past decade or two have been in small firms, small, medium-sized firms. But we have about half the number of early stage entrepreneurs that other developing countries have. We have a problem. So as much as earlier I was saying that we have a new landscape of young black industrialists and people who want to develop products, the reality is we need a lot more. They need a lot more support. They need a lot more access to it. So there's no doubt that there are people out there. The culture is changing. But if we want to have a macro impact, there's no doubt that it's got to be more, and we have to have more of these entrepreneurial firms growing and a lot more support for it.
I want to come to you, Roy, just to get the private sector perspective as well. We hear the need for private sector participation, which has really stepped up in the South African sphere. But are we finding that there's enough facilitation when it comes to access to markets?
I think a point was made earlier. So I think in this broader space of enterprise development, I think it's still too fractious. If I do think about access to finance, one of the big challenges, government have got programs, private business has got programs. If I do think about, the development community, the NGO community, it's very broad-based. I think there's an opportunity to sort of harness a lot of this capability into a much more focused, a much more focused one. So if I do say access to finance, how do we pool the resources? Because access to capital is not the constraint, whether it's through banks, through governments and so on. It's not about access to capital. It's joining that, the access, to the right people, the entrepreneurs that we're talking about, this to create that access. So I think it's too fractious, and we can play a role together, I think, to join up to create, I think, more concentrated pools of capability, whether it's skills development, access to finance per se, mentorship and so on. So, I think all the ingredients are there. But probably not focused enough, so I'd give that view.
Nomvula, before we come to you, Matsi, do you agree, and the entrepreneurs that you speak to on the ground, do they have a big brother that is there as a facilitator?
To be honest, perhaps not, because of the red tape and the access as well. There is a lot of resources that's been thrown at entrepreneurs in South Africa, and we're very lucky relative to other African countries that we've got a government that's committed, that has a framework that actually, whenever I refer to triple BEE or a framework that supports small businesses, a lot of people outside South Africa are very impressed and say, wow, this is good that we have a committed government that actually wants to support small businesses. So a lot of resources are being thrown, but the access and the ability for, it's always a top-bottom approach, never a bottom-up approach. So those who are on the ground, who are trying to develop small businesses, who are running small businesses, they feel that it's very difficult for us unless we have an uncle who works for Telkom or an auntie who sits on the board of Eskom for us to actually get those opportunities. So there is that cloud of, well, as much as it's there, how do we get, how do we get to those opportunities? Access to markets, yes. Corporate South Africa has a big role to play towards integrating small businesses within their value chain and supply chain. The government has a big opportunity, to integrate small businesses and groom and hone small businesses. Africa as a continent, we have to start seeing Africa as a market. How do we integrate ourselves as part of the continent? So how do we harness that for entrepreneurs to be able to say, I've got a client who's in Zambia. How do we speak that language, that continental and global language? How do we harness our small businesses to integrate themselves into the bigger picture? Yeah.
Nomvula, is government and your department in particular speaking to the men on the ground and women on the ground as well, who are these business owners?
I don't think we have a choice. We have been established to speak to men and women on the ground in the SMME space and cooperatives. But I think one critical thing that we need to raise is that there are lots and lots of opportunities. There are interventions in government, there are support tools and so on. But the challenge is that most SMMEs either don't know about those support programs, or if they know, they don't know how to access them. I think we need a lot of information blitz, just go out there, communicate, talk to people. And there are still people who don't believe, if government says we have this program, they still don't believe that, oh, Econ, is it true? Can it happen? They haven't seen role models. They haven't seen people who are saying, I have been assisted, supported by government. And of course, I'm happy the entrepreneurs are here. Please, those of you who have been supported by government, do come out and say, I have been supported by government. Because we had quite a number of them. The DTI there's a long list of people who have supported by the DTI. But most of our SMMEs, they really do not come out and say, yes, I am a living example. Like what Xolani is saying right now, that I got a loan from ABSA Those who got an incentive scheme, free money for that matter, from government, they never come. I don't know, maybe they're shy to say, I have been supported by government. But however, I think Kolani raised a very critical issue. We need to venture into all these sectors because we tend to flock to one sector, mining, transport, you know, the so-called sexy sectors. There is an agricultural sector, and when you talk of agriculture with our young people, they think farming. Those are two different things. Agriculture is not farming. Agriculture is a science. It involves so many things. There's agro-processing. There are so pockets of opportunity within the value chain of agro-processing, which people have to take advantage of. We are sitting back and maybe just to emphasize black entrepreneurs. There is this myth of saying agriculture, farming is for white males. And hence, we don't venture into that space where there are lots and lots of opportunities. And in fact, it's the access to those areas is not as difficult as in areas like mining and manufacturing. But what I'm saying here is that we need to open up, we need to communicate. I'm happy about this platform that you have created, so that we need to interact with the people, with the entrepreneurs out there. There is also the issue of access to markets, the 30% commitment by government. So far, it's still a concept. But as a department, we have been given a responsibility to spearhead that it actually happens, that 30% of procurement opportunities in public sector should go to SMMEs and cooperatives. We are really sitting on that aspect. We want to make it to work, to go to all government departments and say, to what extent are you giving procurement opportunities to SMMEs and to cooperatives? But we are also going to private sector to say, let us partner. What Sabina was saying, we spoke to Siemens, we are speaking to private sector is opening up. They are ready for us. Hence we are saying, let us talk, let's communicate and stop pointing fingers at each other.
I must tell you, as someone who is an outside observer, it's nice to hear that the relationship between government and the private sector is definitely working out, at least in one aspect and avenue. What I notice is that there is a strong emphasis here on female as well as black entrepreneurship training, which is needed, especially in a society like South Africa. But we can't ignore the fact that there needs to be some kind of exchange and skills transfer and partnership between those who have the innovation, the skills and the abilities to assist these other individuals who need to kind of be brought up the entrepreneurship chain. For me, it almost seems as though there needs to be some kind of suggestion of a innovation bank, or where all these individuals can come together, regardless of race or gender, and exchange certain ideas, exchange certain idea offerings. And it seems to me as though a private institution or big private sector player like Barclays, Roy, might be the perfect facilitator for such, because you come into contact with all these individuals, especially from a global perspective.
I think there's a good example here. You know, we're a very big player in agriculture in South Africa, and as I've touched many of these commercial farmers that we've got, I think the point was made earlier, these are not farmers, these are scientists. And so that skill and very not, it doesn't often come from them, it comes from their partnership. And the one I think of, the biggest tomato grower in Limpopo province, an Israeli company is set up literally on their farm and brought this technology of the highest order to the country. That South African company is invested as co-partner. Now around an opportunity like that, now that was specific to that farm, but they're now supplying the industry with way beyond just, let's say, tomato plants or whatever it was, So that technology is coming into the country. And then I think we underestimate what is happening on the ground. And I think the point was made earlier that I think where opportunities are being unlocked of partnership, like has been mentioned here, I think we need to showcase them, more and more and more. But it's creating, and this is rural development, because that's where a lot of agriculture happens. Partnerships are happening on the ground, maybe on a small scale, whether it's supplying a small farm stall on the road, with fresh produce, or even, giving people access to the market, the decentralized markets that are started to be created, that I've seen people locking into that type of infrastructure, and so on. So I think it's happening. Must it happen at a much faster pace? I do. And maybe just, my observation, from the ministry, and just to pay the compliments, I think the minister herself, I think we're seeing an energy that we haven't seen before, and I suppose I think there was a lot of concern at the time that the ministry was created, is it going to succeed? But I think it's got off to a flying start, and if it creates the impetus for us to join hands and make a difference, then they've done their job.
Matsi, you agree?
Absolutely. I think Roy has said a lot of pointers, and we all have a role to play. The ministry is set so that it can consolidate the space, and whether it succeeds or fails, it's up to all of us, the entrepreneurs, the stakeholders, the corporations. So we all have a role to play. Enterprise development as being one code within the revised BEE, it's a one code that can actually develop small businesses. We need to be able to monitor and evaluate its impact, because that's the one thing that's been missing, is that as much as it's a code, how do we actually assess its impact that it's had for small businesses? But it's there, it governs us. We all have a role to play in making it work.
All stakeholders involved, and also education institutions as well. As you said, it starts from primary school, where you start innovating and cultivating that sense of entrepreneurship, like the likes of Xolani have managed to portray. But I'd like us to come to the floor for questions again. There is a gentleman with a question, 2 hands, the lady, and then the gentleman, and the other gentleman, another lady behind in the audience. We'll start with the gentleman to my right over here.
My name is Russell Baloi. I'm a managing director of a small consulting firm called NVDev. We work a lot with cooperatives, and my question is directed at the gentleman from Barclays, talking about access to finance being not a problem, but access to the market being the problem. And our experience seems to be different, in the sense that a typical entrepreneur today is somebody who has a going business, and their major interest and struggle is to grow the business. And hence then comes the challenge of trying to comply before you can compete at the next level. So access to the market, I think that's where you are. Because for me, if you're running around with a business plan, looking for finance, you're not an entrepreneur. An entrepreneur, you take stock of what you have and start doing something. And based on the success of what you are doing already, you then look for more finance to grow the business. The last point that I want to touch on is around the economy that we're saying we want to grow leading to 2030. I think the reality of our country right now, the NDP is very clear in terms of what kind of problems do we have and what vision do we need to achieve by 2030. And my biggest problem now with the current status quo is that we seem not to be paying much attention to the type of industries that were growing, that will really make it a point that come 2030, everybody will be happy. Because that introduces the concept of the green economy. And myself operating on that specific space, having tried to open a bicycle shop, not for your sport bikes, but commuter bicycles. We have done the research, it's out there, it's very clear. People are struggling to move around. Even people with cars are willing to go around on a bike, or even walk for that matter. But we have gone around looking for finance, but on our own, we could not wait, we had to operate. And the same goes for women who are busy trying to do recycling that we work with. Every day you see them trying to push those trolleys. They've been there running business for 10 years or more, but they're not getting anywhere.
Mr. Baloi, we'll have to pause it there for a moment. Thank you so much for your question. There's a gentleman right behind you with the question, and then we'll come to the lady and the other one at the back there.
Hello everybody, my name is Michael Szymanski, I'm from LEAP. We've been doing enterprise development for a number of years, And the new changes in the codes have been fantastic. I think with the shift around limiting early payments to 15% and capping it, kind of is in the spirits of the code, in the sense that large corporates cannot just earn full enterprise development points by just paying early. They actually have to contribute and develop entrepreneurs on the ground. And I suppose this is leading up to my question. A lot of the corporates now are looking for the entrepreneurs, the EME, the 31% black female-owned companies out there that are as per the requirement of the code. We were in a scenario a couple of weeks back where a corporate asked us to find a source these entrepreneurs, and we did, and the entrepreneurs went in and did a pitch for procurement, and they came out and said, yes, it's looking good, but we've got 120 days. 120-day payments. And we turned around and we said, hold on. Is the person at the end of the procurement, or the person who's developing the NDP, the person who's sitting on the other side of the table, have they been entrepreneurs before, and have they thought about the entrepreneurs themselves? Because being an EME, you're a small business, you're employing few people, and you get business from a large corporate, and it's 120 days, it'll kill you before you even get started. So my question kind of comes from a sense of, when the NDP, when the various programs are put together, has it been by entrepreneurs who have been in the game, who understand what it means to sell your car, to sleep at the factory, to do whatever needs to be done in order to get the job done, and they understand where the person across the table who's selling them or trying to get the product in, do they understand where they're coming from?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your question, Mr. Szymanski. While the mic makes its way to the lady further down and onto my right, I'd like to quickly come to Roy to respond to Russell Baloyi's question with regard to the balance. Maybe it's not financing that's the issue, but obviously access to markets, how we need to address that.
Thanks for the question, Mr. Baloyi. Just to go back to my statement earlier, I said I think from an institutional point of view, it'd be government or banks, our challenge is not access to capital. So we've got access to capital, which we should be deploying. So that was the first point. That's our problem, not yours. I think where the challenges arrives is, how do we deploy that capital and put it into the hands of the entrepreneur, which I think is your question. And perhaps this goes back to my reference about a little bit fractious I suppose the community or the ecosystem, in that very many people don't know where to go in the first place. I think from a Barclays Africa or from an ABSA point of view, this is where we've established these enterprise development centres. Thousands of people come through these platforms every month, and it starts with that mentorship, skills development, and certainly from if there's a business opportunity like you've described, we'll review it. Will it be yes or no? And with some colleagues who saw this maybe 6 months ago, so I was in one of these enterprise development centres. A lady was literally standing there, banging on the desk and said, "I need help," and she had her pack of information.
Sure.
This was a Friday afternoon. By Tuesday, we gave her money, and quite a sizable sum of money. But she was prepared. Okay. Number one, she was insistent. She wasn't going away until she had an answer. It might have been no. But she was pretty insistent that she wanted help, and within days we were able to do it. Now I don't say that's the case. So what's the lesson there? She came very prepared. She had a very, as you articulated the opportunity, I think she had. She was in the lucky position that she did have collateral. Not that we took the collateral immediately. The collateral was in the background. I don't think other people hadn't recognized it. So I think it's every opportunity like this. From our point of view, the organizational point of view, we established a fund some years back. We try and lend out 250 million a year in that fund, really to unsecured lending. So we've created the platform for it. Are we getting it out there? Are we telling the market enough that it's out there? Perhaps we're not doing that.
A little bit more work on that.
But Mr. Baloyi, welcome. We can chat thereafter and see what we can do, for you.
Perfect. Before time pressures catch up with us, Miriam, a quick response to you. Are these measures and controls and initiatives by government written by entrepreneurs for entrepreneurs, to respond to Mr. Szymanski's question?
Well, I was just going to say that on scale there are some gaps. I think the services to small firms have grown enormously, and the support to entrepreneurs, the landscape has really changed over the past, I would say, especially the last 5 years or so. But there are some gaps. There are gaps in that early stage. So somebody who has collateral is in a totally different zone to most people in this country, let's face it. So that getting that first stage and support in ideation is a real gap. I was looking at the landscape of support organizations. There was a review by the Aspen Institute, and the one area where there's almost no service at all is in ideation. The early stage when you've just got an idea, you need to shape it, you need to get ready, you're that person who doesn't have collateral, what do I do now?
Yeah.
That sort of stage. Then there's another stage that's a problem, which is getting to medium size. We have a missing middle in this economy. And so people struggle to go from small to the next stage to middle size. It's a huge problem, and that's where you start to get the jobs and the growth. The other challenge is working capital, and that's where a lot of firms fail. So you just get to a cash crunch and you need you need some help over the hump. It's very hard to get support. And alongside of that, the commitment to 30-day payments is incredibly important. I still hear the speeches about it. In the public sector, it's a huge issue, but you know what, in the private sector, it's also an issue. And it's probably, if there was one thing you could do, besides access to the value chain, it's to get those 30-day payments.
Miriam, unfortunately, time pressures are against us. My apologies to both the two ladies who had the final two questions from the audience there. But in summation, with the NDP as a blueprint for this nation as well as for small and medium enterprises, Matsi, are we on the right track? And from your perspective, what more can we do within the next 15 years?
I certainly believe that we are on the right track. Everybody just has a role to play. Let's integrate the space. Let's not speak with many voices. Let's speak with one voice. And let's just acknowledge the success stories as well. Let's sell those good stories from whether you've been supported by the government or corporate sector, because people need examples of saying they have done it and I can also be a beneficiary. Yeah.
Miriam?
Well, I can only repeat, we need to support entrepreneurs, we need to support real industrialists who are going to grow jobs, grow businesses, get access to the value chain, to the supply chain. And if we're going to do the set-asides, and I hope those happen, whether it's at telecom or Barclays or in government, we're going to need an ecosystem to support them, a very much more substantial ecosystem of support. By the time you're putting out to tender, it's too late.
Roy?
Yeah, I think we've got the ingredients to really make a success of it. I think the NDP is the guiding plan, and I think we can all contribute to it, and in creating this ecosystem that I think Miriam describes, joining hands. The advice that I would give is, don't try and boil the ocean. Let's pick the 2 or 3 or 4 things that make the biggest difference the quickest. And I think if we do that, we can get out of the starting blocks a whole lot quicker, because the time for talking has to be over. Implementation
is key. Nomvula, very quickly.
NDP is government driving policy. It's a master plan for government. And all our programs, the foundation of our department is governed by the NDP. 90% of jobs to be created by 2030 through SMMEs and cooperatives. That is the guiding principle that is guiding our department. And there are programs that are in place. Please do approach the Department of Small Business. We are willing to talk to entrepreneurs, to talk to business, to talk to experts who are out there, researchers. Come and assist. Matsi, you are in the space. You are welcome, my dear, to communicate with government.
Camaraderie and collaboration clearly playing its role here. Thank you so much to our panelists. It is unfortunate that we have run out of time, but a big thank you once more to Nomvula Makgotlho, who is the Chief Director for the Ministry of Small Business Development, Roy Ross, Chief Executive of Business Banking Africa at Barclays Africa, National Planning Commissioner Miriam Altman, who is also the Head of Group Strategy at Telkom, and Matsi Modise, the National Executive Director of the South African Black Entrepreneurs Forum. And of course, a big thank you to our studio audience for participating, and all of you for asking your questions and providing feedback. Well, that's where we leave it for this edition of NDP, A Plan in Motion. Join us again next time.
Brought to you by ABSA, a member of Barclays, in association with Business Leadership South Africa.